All right. Well, thank you, first of all, everyone, for joining us today for today's webinar, which is on upgrading to TIBCO Jaspersoft 7 with the Customer Success Team. If you're a Jaspersoft customer, you've probably heard the announcement a number of months ago, this new release, Jaspersoft 7. And obviously, that's going to be the focus of today's webinar. We're going to tell you what was in Jaspersoft 7, but more importantly, how you can get from your current version of Jaspersoft to the latest version of Jaspersoft, which is Jaspersoft 7.1. So I'm going to open up and take the first couple of slides, and then I'm actually going to hand you over to our head of customer success for Jaspersoft, and I'll actually introduce you to him on this next slide here. So currently speaking, this is Shane Switterick, Product Marketing Manager at TIBCO, specific to the Jaspersoft product group based in San Francisco, smoky San Francisco, California today. We've got some wildfires up north. It's getting pretty smoky in the city. And I've also got Gonzalo Moreno, who I just mentioned in the last slide. He's our Director of Customer Success at TIBCO, and also specific to the Jaspersoft product group. So if you're part of the Jaspersoft Upshift program, which we'll explain later, you're probably familiar with Gonzalo, and he's actually sitting in the same room with me, and we both work in the same office here in San Francisco. That's who you're going to be hearing from today. And the last slide before I hand it over to Gonzalo is this agenda. And we're going to start by talking about some of the reasons why you would upgrade. And obviously, you know, there are features in the latest version that you probably don't have access to in your existing Jaspersoft version. And there are a number of additional reasons around security related or end of support for some older versions that we'll also get into. So we'll talk a little bit about why upgrade. I mentioned that the focus will really be on the process for upgrading. So that's where we're going to spend a good portion of our time today. And we'll also talk about who can assist you in the upgrade. And Gonzalo is going to outline, we have great customer success team that's really here to make you successful in your migration, but we're going to talk at an objective level what it takes to upgrade from your existing version to the latest. And you can really make the decision on whether or not customer success or professional services are something that you need. So we'll talk about that at an objective level, and then we'll talk about some of the benefits of the customer success program. And that will lead us really into that last bullet point, or the second to last bullet point, of what does the customer success team do. And before I hand over to Gonzalo, two things to keep in mind. The first is that this webinar is being recorded, and we'll send out a recording of this to everyone via email within the next day or two. So keep an eye out for that if you're interested in consuming that afterwards or sharing with others. And the second is, if you have questions throughout the course of today's content, please plug those into the Q&A box in the Zoom portal, not the chat box. The Q&A box will just give us one place to look at while we're fielding questions at the end, but also if we're not able to get to your question, we get a log of all those Q&A questions after the webinar, so we'll be able to follow up with you after today's session. So with that, I don't want to take any more time away from Gonzalo. I'll go ahead and hand it over to him, and he's going to take you through the bulk of today's content.
All right, thank you, everyone. My name is Gonzalo. Thank you for that nice introduction, Shane. It is a little bit smoky in San Francisco today, but not in this presentation. So with that, let's get started on why to upgrade. But before we do that, we have a quick little polling question. Are you currently enrolled in the Jaspersoft Upshift program? If so, which Upshift tier are you in? So I'll give you a second or two to go ahead and answer this little question, and then we'll use the results at the end. All right, so I'll just go ahead and move on.
And Gonzalo, just as a quick update, so we actually have no one from the Upshift program on today's call, so it's a good opportunity to kind of get into a bit more depth perhaps on what the Upshift program is about.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Shane. All right, so I'll start off with the big question, right? You know, you may be okay with your current version. You need maybe more of a a compelling set of reasons to actually go ahead and upgrade. You know, you may have heard a little bit about what's new in the product, but usually like that's not enough. So I'm just going to enumerate a bunch of reasons why you should upgrade. And then in the next slide, I'll go ahead and also talk about why you should not ignore upgrading. All right, so we've got at a very high level, we would really love for you to take advantage of the new features and functionality that are available in 7.1. You know, we've got a whole load of enhancements around Visualize.js. Visualize.js is really maturing with every single release that we do, and will continue to do. It's part of like the big embeddability story that we've got going on that we've had for many years, and we are continuing down that road. We've got additional platform support. So, some of you may have noticed as well that, we've added more support for later versions of Tomcat. For Java, we're like up on 1.8. The Spring framework, and additional support for Oracle and WebLogic. We've got a whole set of security improvements. We added some protections against clickjacking, all configurable. And as just as a note from the field, it might not be specifically spelled out in some of the documentation that you might see, but we have really made a big effort to improve our performance in ad hoc since 6.3, and it's noticeable. And what that means on a practical level is that it really adds to our self-service story. All right, and as with any release, we've got a countless number of bug and security fixes that, as usual, make every release our most stable and reliable version of the product. All right, so what do you risk by not upgrading? There's always the temptation to just keep on going with something that you have, and you don't want to rock the boat, but there's like a few things that you should take into consideration if as a counterpoint. If you are on a version older than the 6.2 or earlier, that's no longer supported by TIBCO Jaspersoft. Well, what does that mean? That it's no longer supported? Well, you can still file tickets with support on issues relating to 6.2, but you should realize that if whatever issue you bring to support's attention has been fixed since that version, then we really like the only path forward for you would be to upgrade. And as a tip, if you do need to file a support ticket for a version that's 6.2 or earlier, just go ahead and put, when you're filling out like the case info, just put it as the latest release, because if our, there's a little bit of scrubbing that happens before it gets to our support engineers, and it might get rejected if it's, if our filters see that it's 6.2 or earlier. But we really want to be able to consider all cases that come in. All right, if you are on version 6.3.x, support will end in June of next year. You might think, okay, well, that's 2 seasons away, 7 months away. But like anything else, that day will get here before you know it. All right, support for 6.4.x is going to run out in 2020. So that gives you, a little bit under 2 years. So you're reasonably okay there. And so at that point, you might just consider, you might have like a more of an objective reading as to whether or not you should upgrade based on the new set of features and functionality and bug fixes that we're bringing to the table in 7.1. All right, and version 7.1 will be supported until sometime around 2021. So you'll get the benefit of, if you install now, of having something solid until 2021. So that's planning for the future. All right, so we're going to do a brief detour and just consider a few of the items that are new in Jaspersoft 7. Again, the focus of this particular webinar isn't to discuss what's new in Jaspersoft 7, but I just want to touch upon a few of the highlights there, and we'll have some resources for you at the end that you can follow up if you really want to dive in there and get a good sense of what's in Jaspersoft 7. All right, so the big thing is, the main theme for this release is about designing easily and embedding immersively. So you can turn a report or a dashboard into an integrated component of your application, and with essentially very minimal development effort. And Visualize.js, the big thing about like this particular release is that it supports embedding ad hoc views. It gives you a super streamlined workflow to get something out quickly. So if you have somebody who's all ready to go, who can essentially design an ad hoc view in minutes, you can start exposing that with Visualize in, again, with very minimal technical effort. And so I'll very, very briefly touch upon that, but again, that's not the focus of this particular webinar. All right, so beyond just integrating with Visualize, you can, of course, still embed in other ways. You've got more tools in your toolkit. It all depends on your use case, and you're not forced to integrate with Visualize if you don't want, of course, you can still deploy Jasper Report Server without integrating as a separate reporting portal if that's what you need to do. And it's not a bad way to get started. You get comfortable with the product, and you can deal with the integration aspects of it afterward. All right, so for historical context, we introduced the ability to embed reports a long time ago, 2014, ages ago, dinosaur age in the software industry. We introduced the ability to embed dashboards, and with Jaspersoft 7, we have now added the ability to take ad hoc views and embed them into your application via Visualize.js, which is our JavaScript API. So we have continuously improved it, and we will continue to add features to this particular way of integrating via JavaScript, which is, as you've noticed, a big industry trend, not just for us, but for a lot of software vendors. All right. If you're not familiar with ad hoc views, the idea is that on the Jasper Report Server, you can develop a metadata layer to the underlying reporting data that lets your developers and business users quickly access the data, right? So you don't need a DBA essentially to start writing your reports for you. You just expose the data via the metadata layer and let the people who know the data best assemble and their reports concentrate on the meaning of the data and telling a story with the data rather than having to worry about, SQL, for instance. And, we do that with, you can build the reports and visualizations. We've got the drag and drop UI environment. So very, very minimal technical effort. You can create crosstabs, tables, you can create data filters, and much more, all in the web environment. And so once you've saved these reports on the Jasper Report Server, You can hand it off to a JavaScript developer who can, essentially with only a few lines of code, access that ad hoc view and embed it into your web application. Your end user won't even know that Jasper is there. And so we have this simple workflow about creating and saving your ad hoc view on the server, and then visualizing it, and then using Visualize to embed it into your application. So you're also able to restyle that ad hoc view to match the look and feel of your application using CSS. We have a new and improved crosstab component with infinite scrolling for very large result sets that return very quickly, and load more data as you scroll down the table. So it's, we've taken, a lot of the feedback that we've gotten from previous releases into consideration and seriously, and we've added, some performance-friendly things to Visualize to make it elegant for the end user, and of course it has modern-looking components for the entire set of. All right, so let's see. So onward. So we've got as well. So I've kind of talked a little bit about the workflow, but what you find in 7.1 does not end just with ad hoc. We've added interoperability with other TIBCO products. So Jasper itself is one software component, like of a much larger software ecosystem that TIBCO manages. So if you are interested, for instance, in data virtualization, we have a product called TIBCO Data Virtualization, which allows you to join data from different sources in a high performance fashion, so you can use them for Jaspersoft Studio reports and use it as a data source for your domains and everything else. And so it's, it's a worthwhile alternative to, for instance, say, should I build a data warehouse, or should I go with the data virtualizer product? So you've got options. We're adding options there. And we're also interfacing with TIBCO Spotfire. So TIBCO Spotfire provides advanced data visualization, data analytics, predictive analytics, and it's a great discovery tool. So if you have that already, you can create operational reports using Jaspersoft Studio and leverage your Spotfire content. All right, so this was just a brief recap. I tried to power through what was in Jaspersoft, what's new in Jaspersoft 7. If you are intrigued by some of the stuff that I said, I really invite you to join one of our weekly demos. You'll see it right from the sales consulting team. You'll see a good bunch of demos there. The product management team has also recorded a webinar recording this new version. It goes into more depth than what I just mentioned here, and you'll get a better sense of whether or not Jaspersoft 7 is right for you. And there we go. That's where you can find it. Jaspersoft.com, on-demand webinars, introducing Jaspersoft 7. All right, so what's the process for upgrading? So we're gonna dive straight in, right into the details of a typical upgrade plan, and there's we're gonna tackle some of the planning bits that you'll need to do. We're going to go over some of the key steps in the upgrade process, and we are going to also talk about the steps that you'll need to do before getting started on this particular upgrade journey. Now, a lot of what I'm going to be saying you can find on the upgrade guide that we ship with. You'll find that in our you'll find that in multiple places. You'll find that in our docs folder when you download Jasper Report Server. You can find it on our community website. You know, there you'll find tons of great resources. So you know, this is essentially a summary of that, as well as, you know, some of the lessons that the customer success team has learned along the way. All right, so, you know, one of the things that you'll need to figure out is, you know, okay, well, what are like the two big, you know, we've essentially through experience, hard experience, found that, you know, like the two big factors are going to drive your upgrade planning, right? So obviously you want to have, you know, if complexity is okay, but, you know, you have to plan for it, right? And the first big factor is how old is your current version of Jasper Reports server that you're working with. If you're working with a version, you know, that's really old, then you're going to have to take it a little bit more slowly, maybe stand up a few test environments to make really sure that you're that you're doing the upgrade process correctly, the migration process, right? And then the other big item, you know, is, you know, how many customizations have you put in place for your Jaspersoft platform? And how complex are they? So I'm going to tackle, you know, a lot of the following slides are going to tackle that second point. The, you know, like I said in previous slides, if you are on version 6.2 or older, you are definitely putting yourself at risk, you know, simply because we will not be able to support you in as best a way as we can. All right, so the older your current version, you know, the more you're likely to have to review your customizations and the underlying software on which it sits. So if you're upgrading from a more recent version, you know, that's the big counterpoint, then the risk goes down, all right? And, you know, the example that I cite there is that with version 6.0.1, which, you know, we're talking about, you know, I think it was around 2014, we changed the way that we did our SSOs, you know, our single sign-ons. And so if you have, you know, if you've developed customizations around SSO and you have a version that's older than 6.0.1, then, you know, this is a big warning flag. You will probably have to refactor them completely in order to make it work in the best possible way with with later versions of our product. All right, that's just one risk, but, you know, SSO is a common activity that a lot of our customers do, so I just wanted to point that out as a specific example of what you risk with older versions of the product. If you have a lot of customizations, then of course you'll have to do more testing and potentially even refactoring of some of your customizations. There's also the possibility that the product has evolved in such a way that some of your customizations may no longer be needed. You know, we've added a lot of, you know, like for instance, you can, you know, reference profile attributes, you know, when defining data sources. That's a common example that, you know, it's been around for a while, right? So you don't have to develop a custom data source around that. And that's just one small little example of, you know, like the way that the product has evolved in the many years. All right, and so yet another point to consider, right? So on the right-hand side there, I've got the platform support sheet, you know, which you can also download from our community website. And you'll want to review it, because it'll have, our QA team has gone ahead and tested Jasper Server against multiple databases, data sources. They've tested it against specific versions of web browsers. They've tested particular versions of big data vendors, drivers, JDKs, all the bits that Jasper relies on. The Jasper Reports server application is just one element in a larger software stack, and so you got to make sure that the elements in your stack are compliant with with the version that you're on. And so you might notice that a particular version, you might be on an older version of a database, or that we no longer support, or you'll have to upgrade from in JDK 7 to JDK 8, because we no longer support that. So there's bits in there that are important for you to consider that will add complexity to your underlying infrastructure. So the last bit that we want you to, we don't want you to get in trouble, like for instance, when you're doing an upgrade, have it go okay, go well even, and then you run into a problem, and you run into support, and then we discover that you're relying, let's say, like on an older version of the Java developer kit, and because that would throw off like the entire bit, and support at that point might not be able to help you. So that's a very, very important document to take into consideration as you consider your infrastructure for when you're doing your upgrade. All right, success is indeed built one step at a time. So I'll just go over, some of the, like at a broad level, what are like the key steps in the process. Of course, the devil's in the details, and we always hear from customers who, with varying degrees of success, do the upgrade on their own. All right. So the first step would be to stand up a new instance of the latest version of Jasper Report Server. Of course, we would want you to do this all on a test environment. It's great to get your hands dirty on it just to see what's going on there. Export the repository from your old instance. So, with every new version, there are slight differences and updates in the schema for our repository. So you'll want to use our import-export scripts because they'll manage that for you automatically. You'll want to import it to the new instance. Just like we have an export tool, we also have an import tool. Make sure that it's working on the new instance, and then start applying your upgraded, updated customizations to the new instance one by one. Because that's the bit that will tell you, okay, well, do I really need to fix this one particular component, or can I just throw it in as is? I'm going to go over some of the details around customizations in a few of the later slides here. And of course, you've got to test your customizations and deploy and do a cutover, depending on the procedures at your company. Now, I know I made it sound a little bit easy. That's all you really have to do. But the complications may arise in the customizations that you have in place. All right, so that's where you'll probably end up spending a lot of your time, is figuring out, like the state of your customizations. before you get started, right, you'll want to make a backup of your repository. I mentioned earlier that we've got an export tool for backing up your database, and it does it in an agnostic, database agnostic manner. So if you've ever actually looked into that export file, you'll see that it's just a bunch of XML files in there. You can always, as well, use, like the native database admin tools for, as an extra layer of backup security. And you'll also want to make a backup of the file system on where you've deployed Jasper Report Server. All right. For example, if you work with Tomcat, you're familiar with the web apps folder under which you've got like the set of web applications that particular instance is working with, and you'll see the Jasper Report Server. Just back the whole thing up before you do any kind of serious work. All right. So that's what to do before getting started, right? All right, so the key is to track your customizations, right? I can't stress this enough, because this will be, if the devil is in the details, this is where the devil is. All right, so your, what are your, customizations? Do you have a log of what they are? Keep an inventory of them if you can, like in the same way that like a sysadmin keeps track of, things that have gone on with like a particular environment's operating system, because that'll really, you'll resort to that document quite a bit. If like I'm saying here in this bullet point, you'll want to have them documented ideally, right? So what happens if you don't have them documented? Then that's where you can run into your first roadblock. It's not an impossible roadblock; it just requires work. So what typically I've seen other customers do is that they'll compare the particular release that they're on. So for example, let's say that they're on version 6.4.3. They've added a bunch of customizations. And then they, don't know what the customizations are. What they might do is compare their own server instance with a plain vanilla 6.4.3, and check out the differences there. It's hopefully that doesn't sound pleasant, and you get a little bit of like the pain level involved in doing that kind of an exercise. So it's doable. It's not impossible, but it's not easy, and it should definitely inspire you to keep a document somewhere of your customizations. And if you don't have that, now's a good time to get started. All right, and like I mentioned in a previous slide, maybe some of the customizations that you have now are part of the product. A lot of times we'll get into situations where we'll tell the customer, hey, that particular piece of functionality is coming up in a future version of our product, and you have a bunch of options. You could either wait for that feature to come out in a future release of the product, or you could set something up yourself, and then knowing that like for that future version, once you adopt it, you might have to just take out the scaffolding and remove that particular customization. All right. Not all customizations are created equal. This is very, very true. Some customizations are super trivial, and some are actually can lead, like if you're doing an upgrade, they can be like a full-blown refactoring project. I mentioned having to refactor SSOs if you are on a version earlier than 6.0.1. That's just one example. So if we have, so I'm just gonna lay out some examples from like the most simple to the most complex. By no means is this a comprehensive list, but what I'm hoping to do here is for you to get a flavor of like the types of customizations that you may or may not have. So modifying properties files and other text-based files, if you've ever added increased the memory on your Tomcat server, that's just a simple text-based change. If you've changed the file virtualizer strategy in Jasper Reports server, that's also a very simple text-based change. So those are like the simple ones. You still need to document them and keep track of them, because at some point you may have made some modest configuration changes that you'll need to understand for the later version of the product, whether or not you need to still keep them. All right, so next up on the complexity level, we've got JSP file customizations. So these are low to medium level complexity and should be fairly straightforward to port to a newer version. And of course, the risk goes up the longer that you've waited to do the upgrade. Now, if you compare the JSP files from, let's say, version 5.0 to like the ones that we have now, they'll be significantly different. But if you compare them from 7.1 to 6.4.3, they might be more modest in nature depending on what you have done. So that's another bit to keep track of. Modifying JavaScript files in the scripts folder. So you may have noticed as well that we've got a whole load of JavaScript. And under the scripts folder, under the Jasper Server Pro folder in your web apps. And they tend to change from version to version. So if you have made changes there, then you will definitely need to review them. Like a high-risk behavior here would be to take a file that you had in a previous version and then just simply drop it into your scripts folder. And having the expectation that it would work, because it's probably, there's a risk factor in there. All right, up a notch, up a level in degree of difficulty and complexity. We've got SSOs, like I've mentioned before, custom data sources, which again, you may or may not need to refactor. And other customizations that extend the functionality of the server, right? If you are using an existing set of APIs, then you're more than likely going to be okay. You might have to review some things. You might have to recompile some of your code against the latest set of Jasper Reports server libraries. You might. But most of the time, you're going to be okay. If you stick to an extension strategy. All right, and then here we have essentially, like the most complex undertaking that we have. As given our open source roots, we do have the ability to. We do provide the server sources for our commercial version of the product, so you can go ahead and download the sources if you so wish, and take a look at it. there. And there's always that particular, we provide even a guide on how to and build it and deploy it there. So there's loads of room to do practically anything with the sources and that set of instructions. The big danger here is that if you start modifying the server sources and modifying how the server itself changes, then you will have to really take a very, very close look at the later version of the product and see if the underlying implementations themselves have changed, because that would really require an entire refactoring project on your part. So, not many of our customers take that kind of project on, because there is this particular risk factor, and most of our customers choose to stick to an extension strategy, which is the one that we recommend. This particular strategy, you really will need to be fully staffed up in terms of development expertise. All right, and so after validating on a test environment, so let's say that you have gone ahead and had a successful upgrade, you've validated the whole thing on your on your test environment. Can you take a victory lap at that point? Well, there's a few points to consider. You'll need to do a few steps, that we recommend here after the upgrade. As usual, please do all the functional testing. Make sure that it does what it's supposed to do. And here's like a few extra bits of advice that we usually pass on to customers. If you are able to do load testing, we highly encourage you to do load testing. Because that'll reveal potential bottlenecks in your application. Like I said earlier, a Jasper Report server itself is just one element in that larger software stack. So if you see potential slowdowns, it might not be anything to do with Jasper Report server. It might be some other element in your software stack. Maybe it's not enough threads to your database, or your application server doesn't have enough memory. And so doing load testing will reveal that kind of problem. And again, that's one little simple example that we see customers do all the time. They might say, all right, let's set up a cluster and a load balancer. Bonus recommendation. If you are able to, you can set up an application performance monitoring tool, to be able to take the pulse of your Jasper application. And, if and when you file tickets with our support team about any performance slowdowns, you would be able to provide some of the clues that your application performance monitoring tool would provide. And, just looking at past cases that, we end up spending a lot of time on doing diagnosis type work, trying to figure out whether or not a particular element is the one responsible for the slowdown. So if you have that in place, it'll go a long way to a faster resolution of any performance problems you may have. All right, who can assist you in the upgrade? Your head might be spinning. Who's going to help me? You don't have to suffer in silence. All right. If you judge, if you make the judgment after reviewing your customizations, and maybe you are on a more current version of the product, that you can do this mostly on your own. Great. The support team can help you on specific points during the upgrade. Maybe you're running into like an issue with one of the import-export scripts. Maybe there's a bit that you didn't consider, or like a strange stack trace that's showing up. They're definitely like the one, they can definitely help you along that path. And and if you have the inclination, we really encourage you to try it on your own. You'll get a really good sense of what the application is about. You'll if you don't have too many customizations, or if they're not complex in nature, then that would be another good indicator that you could try it on your own first. And like again, like if you run into a few little tactical issues along the way, specific items that you want to look into, then you can always file a ticket with support. If you prefer to have a Jaspersoft expert do it, we've got a professional services team that can step in and do it for you. They could go on site, do the upgrade for you, give you a little bit of transfer of knowledge, and give you other tips and tricks that they've earned from doing tons of installations, and pass that along to you. And so they can do that in a dedicated way to you. So that usually takes 3 or 4 days, depending on the complexity of the application. And your third option is to contact the customer success team. So the customer success team can assist you with understanding your current situation, right? So if you need to just kind of get a lay of the land and see what's going on, we can help you figure that out. We can help assist you with developing an upgrade plan. We can offer, just like the support team, specific technical troubleshooting expertise to help you along the way. And the main focus of the customer success team is teaching you how to fish. We'll pass along our knowledge and experience onto you. We have hundreds of clients that we've worked with, and our main focus is on enabling you, so that we pass along our knowledge, and then afterwards you're able to help yourself. All right, so with having said that, I'm going to tackle a little bit about what the customer success team does. And so at TIBCO, we have a customer success team, and we've got a few items here that talks about what we do, but the main idea that I'd like to leave you with is that we are, if you engage with us, we will be with you throughout the lifetime of your Jasper reports, application deployment, development, testing, and so on. And we will, build a relationship with you. We are kind of like the people that will end up within TIBCO knowing your application the best. We're not, we have a different focus in the support and the PS team, who potentially just do very specific items and tasks. We're here for you throughout the lifetime of your relationship with TIBCO. And we tap into all these different groups that you see, and we can advocate on your behalf. We can weigh in on your behalf if you have specific requests regarding enhancement requests and bugs that engineering and product management need to know about. We coordinate with professional services. We can get you up and running with training. We can weigh in on your situation with the sales and renewals team as well. So we have a broad view into what you do if you engage with us. Our team is made up of, we have deep expertise in the product. We have quite a few people on our team who are former professional services. And so not only can we help you with, the whole, setting up a project, the project management bits that you need to know in order to get started on your project, but we can also dive in there and give you specific technical advice. We do a lot for our customers. I'm not going to go through each of these items, but the main idea here is that we are with you from the moment that you start with the product all the way through development, deployment, and beyond. So you can turn to us for other items that upgrade plans, project plans. Our focus there, once you're beyond having deployed the product, is for you to get the most benefit out of what TIBCO is. And part of the reason why I'm on is because I feel that the benefit, there is great benefit to upgrading to the latest version of Jasper Report Server. All right, so through hard experience, what we found is that if customers engage with support, if they leverage training, if they get professional services when they need it, if they engage with us, the success goes up. The likelihood of success goes sky high. And so we've built that into our service offering in Jaspersoft. We've got multiple people, like a customer success manager who essentially partners with your project team, project managers, product managers. We've got a customer engineer who will assist in the software and architecture projects, and assist you getting started on your project on a technical basis. So we've got a few profiles there to assist you, and we can be there with you throughout the lifetime of your project and beyond. The Upshift offerings that we have, again, I'm not going to go into the details of each of the tiers that we have. We have them from starter all the way through performance. The main idea there is that we've tried to bake in as much as we could of the success behaviors that I mentioned earlier into the service offerings that you see here. And it's no accident that the more success behaviors that you engage in, the higher the likelihood of your project success. If you'd like to learn more, we've got our own little Jaspersoft customer success page. You'll see the link down at the bottom. We'll provide that as well after this webinar, where you can explore a little bit about our offering. If you're interested in the customer success and getting some customer success packages, finding out a little bit more, please contact your sales rep and they will provide you more information. If you don't know who your sales rep is, you could always contact the support team and they will be able to find that information for you. All right, and so we're on to the Q&A portion of the webinar. So Shane, do we have any bits that people would like to, that you see?
Yes, yeah, a couple of questions. First, thank you very much, Gonzalo, for the presentation. I hope that was helpful. Getting into at least some of the details, obviously, more probably require a deeper conversation, but I think that was a great overview of some of the key considerations to think about when upgrading. A good complement to what Gonzalo just covered is, obviously our upgrade guide. So there's a Jaspersoft 7 upgrade guide that you can access through Jaspersoft community. So there's an easy path to get there. If you go to the community homepage, click on docs, which is in the top menu, you can find that document there. Gonzalo just pointed out the Jaspersoft customer success info. If you want additional info on the customer success program and what you get with it and what are some of the benefits, that's a great place to start. But as Gonzalo mentioned, if you want to discuss further and in person, you would go through your Jaspersoft sales rep. So that's the path for getting more involved with Jaspersoft customer success. There have been a couple of questions on just general features available in Jaspersoft 7. Another thing Gonzalo mentioned was we did a release webinar called Introducing Jaspersoft 7 that does a deeper dive into all the features that we kind of blew through today. So you can get some additional information there. there was a question specifically around visualize.js improvements in Jaspersoft 7. So I plugged into the answers in the Q&A a couple of links, one directly to that Introducing Jaspersoft 7 webinar, but there's also a series of demo tutorials on the various features related to Jaspersoft 7 and visualize.js. So that's a good place to start and get, again, a better sense of at least what's specific to embedding with visualize.js. And then the last resource there is a book and a theme that we've been running with, that we did with O'Reilly Media earlier this year on data as a feature. The link under there is actually not correct. That's my fault, but that's easily accessible through jaspersoft.com. And that really relates to, we've been talking about immersive embedding, being able to turn a report or a visualization or a dashboard into an integrated component of your application. And another theme we've been running with is BI that blends in, and that's something that Visualize.js enables a lot. And this O'Reilly book really just touches on that subject from a product development standpoint as it relates to BI. So those are just a couple of resources to check out, but I want to get to some of the questions that we did have in the Q&A. So there's one question relating to crosstabs. That is, have you added the ability to filter on aggregated values in a crosstab? I'll let Gonzalo comment on this. And another thing to keep in mind is neither Gonzalo or myself are in product management, so we might have to follow up with you after this call, but I'll let Gonzalo go ahead and make an initial comment on that.
Yeah, so I don't remember specifically whether or not that was added. So, I suggest for that particular point, either if you really are interested in that, that could be a good question for the sales consultant on one of the demos. I don't think that they did add that, but I'm not 100% sure.
Great. And if I recall, I think nested groups were introduced for crosstabs and obviously infinite scrolling. I know for sure, but again, yeah, that's something we could follow up a bit further and get you a more detailed response. There's another question, Gonzalo. What are the costs associated with professional services and or customer success engagements? So probably just a good clarifying question for the whole group.
Right. So, they are, a lot of the ones are more modest in nature. We have one package where there is no professional services. So that one actually engages in 3 of the 4 success behaviors, right? And so what we end up doing is, you'll get customer success time, both project manager and engineering time, and we will assist you in upgrading, maybe giving you best practices guidance. The expectation there is that you would then take that on yourself, right? So those are, that is like our more modestly priced tier, and then we have, like our high-end tier, the performance tier, which involves 4 weeks of professional services, 300 hours of our customer success time per year, and that really is for when your application really needs a much deeper involvement from a set of Jaspersoft experts. And the best place to start, like if you need like some pricing, like the best place to start is with your sales rep, because you can have a deeper conversation as to what your exact needs are, and then we could potentially jump in and give you guidance there as to which package might be of best use to you.
Great. And I know we are over time, so we'll take one more question and then part ways. The last question is, we looked at some online training, but I've only been able to find older versions for Jasper Server training. Will there be online training for 7.1 available? And I guess 2 parts to that response. The video tutorial playlist will give you a high-level training of some of those features, especially as they relate to visualize.js that I plugged into the answers. But also you see on the screen, there's actually an entire GitHub repo that contains a lot of samples related to visualize.js and a lot of samples related to what's new in 7.1. These are live API samples that you can interact with, change, and to get to this repository and to the GitHub site that's built on top of that, you just do a simple search. Probably the easiest way is GitHub visualize.js, and that will give you a really good opportunity to play with some of these new features in 7.1, again, as they relate to visualize.js. So I encourage you to check that out. And with that, I do want to let everyone go, but before I do, I just want to say a big thank you to Gonzalo for going through this content. A good thank you to the audience for the great questions. I wish you a great rest of your week and a great weekend. Thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you everyone.